But it's awesome to be with you guys this morning. We're doing a series called The Heart of a Psalmist. And we had Naomi share with us last week. She looked at Psalm 40, and it was just really good how she pointed out how the psalmist goes from a mountaintop high moment to a valley, and just kind of how that's a normal part of life. And this week, I'm going to look at another psalm, but before I do, I just want to share something with you guys. I think about random things sometimes. My wife tells me I have ADHD. I tell her, "What are you talking about?" I can stay focused so well. But this week, I've been thinking of past fight camps that I had. So if you don't know, I used to compete in MMA professionally throughout Australia. And it was a really awesome experience. And I guess I was just reflecting on some of my fight camps that I had. If you don't know, fight camps aren't fun. It's usually about 10 weeks out, 8 weeks if you're really pushing it, 2 weeks if you just want to fight and you don't really care and you'll just do your best, which is what I did sometimes. But most of the time, I would have about 10 weeks out from a fight. And you'd get nutritionists to start helping you cut weight because I had to make a certain weight category, which was 61.2, so that wasn't fun having to, eat less. And it wasn't fun either if you see in the corner here, that bald head man back there, his name's Pete. He was one of my coaches for most of my career. He was great. But man, he was really tough in fight camps. And I remember he had this one thing called a shark tank that he would do. And what it was is he would wait till the end of a training session. So I've already done a bunch of running, a bunch of fighting, kicking, punching, all this stuff. And we get towards the end, and I usually get anyone who's there in the gym who has a little bit of knowledge to spar with me. And he'd set a timer. It might be 15 minutes, because when I used to fight, 5-minute rounds, 3 rounds, that's 15 minutes, all right. So you need to go 15 minutes solid. Sounds hard enough if you're sparring and wrestling and grappling for 15 minutes. But what he did that was worse is every minute, he would switch the person out. And it even got worse because when you switch the person out, the person could come from behind and just put me in like a chokehold straight away and have to start fighting. And tapping didn't get me out of it. If I tap, they just get up for a second and then start going again. And it was awful. I hated it with a passion. And I guess reflecting on that, it's just got me to come to this universal truth that I think we could all agree on, that testing is never easy. Whenever someone tests us, it's never an easy thing. And I know I've realized that just from fighting and reflecting on that. And today I want to look at Psalm 139 because we discover something about God's testing us. So I want to dive into this psalm. But I want to point out before we do, God doesn't test us like a school teacher. He's not sitting there marking every little thing that we do, calculating it, giving us a grade average and saying, oh, they didn't meet it. They got a 49% when they should have got a 50%. I'm going to have to hold them back. Or he's not, apprehending us over every little thing. He's not setting us up for failure. I used to have a teacher that taught me biology in high school. I hated biology. Don't know why, I just hated it. But I was really good at biology, and it frustrated her because I would sleep and not do my homework, but I would make A's on tests. So she got really smart. She said, I'll wait for him to fall asleep in class, and then I'll give out the test, which still didn't work because I would wake up halfway through and somehow still get a good grade, which made her even more frustrated. But God doesn't really test us like that. I believe God's testing is a bit different. I also believe God doesn't test us like a scientist. He's not just putting us in awkward situations to see what we do. And the best way I can come up with what I mean by that, and this sounds really bad and it's showing a lot about my childhood, but did anyone ever used to get a magnifying glass and then find little ants? So much fun, right? What's the ant gonna do? I don't think God tests us like that either. So I want to make that clear because I know when you use the word testing, it can be a trigger word. And I'm not mocking that. I'm just pointing out, like, this is not what I'm meaning when I say it. But I want to dive in to Psalm 139 because it's a beautiful psalm. And just to give you a little bit, to make it easier when you read it, Psalm 139 is broken into 4 sections. So every 6 verses, it kind of changes the theme of what it's getting talked about. And I think we need to reflect on each section before moving on. I think that's something we don't realize. And the reason I think we need to reflect on each section as we move on is to follow the rhythm of creation. So when God created the heaven and the earth, in Genesis, it says that he worked for 6 days, right? And then what did he do on the 7th? Rested. So I don't think that it's just a coincidence that there's 4 sections and they're all 6 verses, and then it moves on to a different topic. I think the psalmist is trying to leave little breadcrumb clues to get us to stop and reflect before we go to the next section, to rest on what we've just read and then move on to the next. And I think if we do that, the psalm really shows us something amazing. So I want to dive into Psalm 139 and look at the first section, which is how God knows us. So in about verses 1 to 6, this is what we read. Hopefully it comes up. Oh, it does. It says this, "O Lord, you have searched me and know me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in behind and before and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it." Man, have you ever thought for a second God knows every word that you're going to say before it's on your tongue? And if that doesn't scare the crap out of you, I don't know who you are, because it scares me. Man, the stuff that I think in my head sometimes, like I have ADHD brain, like this thing's firing 100 miles a minute every second. But God knows all the words. He knows the best things that I'm ever going to say to someone. He knows the things that I'm going to say that I'm going to regret more than anything as well. And I think what's amazing in this first section is God knows us more deeply than we know ourselves. We might think that we really know ourselves, we know every little thing about us, but God knows us better. Which is just amazing to me to sit with. Because I'm getting a little bit older and a little bit wiser. I still got some way to go because I know I still slip up lots of times. But what I love is as I've gotten older, people have told me you should go do counseling or, talk to people. And at first I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't need to talk to anyone. Like, I know me. Who needs a counselor? But then I started to see counselors. And you know what's amazing? I can sit with counselors for ages. And sometimes some things you never realized about yourself pop up. You have this way of responding to situations, and you realize, the reason you're responding like this is because there's some deep fear from this childhood trauma that happened to you that you didn't even realize. And what's amazing is God knows us deeper than we know ourselves. He knows all those little things we haven't even discovered about ourselves. And that's amazing. And I think that's something we should pause and reflect on. Just how much God knows us. We can't keep secrets from him. This is why I'm a very upfront person when I pray to God. I tell him what's on my mind. I figured there's no point to try to act nice if I'm angry, because God knows anyways. He knows us so well. And I love reflecting on that. I love how Psalm 139 starts here. This is the first section that we look at. And then in verses 7 to 12, we move on to another section. And this is how God surrounds us. And this is what the psalmist says. "Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to the heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and night wraps itself around me, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for the darkness is as light to you. Man, that's another one. I don't know, for me, it just takes me back. It takes me back, and you can see the bit I really like because I highlighted that. But if we ascend to heaven, God's there. If we make our bed in Sheol, God's there. And Sheol is such an interesting thing. We sometimes translate that and we'll say hell, which is right, but it's kind of not right. Because in the Jewish tradition, Sheol was the place of the dead. There was this idea that God was with the living, so God didn't dwell with the dead. And I love how the psalmist is saying, anywhere you go, God's there. If I'm in the darkest moment of my life, God's still there. And I think something that I really take away from this is that God surrounds us like oxygen. And what I mean by that is we probably can't see oxygen, I don't think. Can anyone here see oxygen? No? Well, good, good. I was going to try to get that superpower if you had it because I figured it'd be cool. But oxygen's all around us. It surrounds us. Without it, we die. But we don't see it. Sometimes we don't feel it, but it's always there. And that's how God is. God surrounds us like oxygen. There's nowhere we can go to get away from him. He's there. There's nowhere I can run and hide to escape God because he's there. And I think that's amazing when we realize that. Because I put a little quote in our high times for this week, and it's a quote by Richard Rohr, where he kind of just says that basically God's around us all the time, and only thing that changes is our awareness of it. And I think that's powerful to realize that. Because we come to church, and I love church. I love gathering. I don't know about anyone else. Sometimes you're singing the worship songs. You just feel like you're floating on a cloud a little bit, right? The pastor, other than me, might get up and do an all right message, and you're like, oh, they were talking to my heart, and you feel a little bit more on a cloud. It's amazing to realize that we can have that kind of stuff all the time because God's always around us. Yeah, it's great to gather together, and we should do that. I'm not knocking that, so I'm not saying don't come to church next week. It's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying we still have God surrounding us like he is now when we're in this building, when we're outside of it. When we're on our bedroom floor and we might be crying about something. Or if you're like me, whenever I'm going through a hard time, I usually take a shower because in the water people can't hear you cry, and you can put on music. Ooh, sounds it out even better. But God's still there. He surrounds us like oxygen. There's nothing we can do to get away from him. And I think that's an amazing thing to reflect on, to rest on, to realize. Because I've heard people say, oh, I'm not good enough for God to care about me. And that's rubbish. God's there. He surrounds all of us like oxygen. And then we go on to the next section, which is how God made us. And this is what we read in verses 13 to 18. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you. When I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth, your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. I try to count them. They are more than the sand. I come to the end, and I am still with you. Man, that gives me goosebumps. God made each one of us. And it's not some standoffish, oh, I'll make them and I'll stand way back here while, a machine does it, or, I'll just do a little wand. I don't know. I guess God could have a wand if he wanted. I don't know how God makes people. But God's intricately woven each one of us together. He took time in putting us together, in making us. I'm a bit frustrated with him about that because he could have made me a couple inches taller, but that's all right. We'll have that conversation, We still have that conversation a lot, but, when I get up there, I'll have some words for him, but I'm sure I'll get over it. But he made you. He pieced you together. It says your unformed substance. To me, that makes me think before you're even growing in your mom's belly, God is holding you, putting you together. How amazing is that? That is powerful when we realize how intricately woven together we are by God. And then we move to the final section. And I'm not going to read the whole final section. I'm just going to read the last two verses of it. But it's in verses 19 to 24. And in this section, we read about how God tests us. And I think before we read it, we got to realize some things that we've already seen in this psalm. The first is that God knows us better than we know ourselves. That's why I don't think he tests us like a school teacher. He's not going to set us up for failure. He's not a mad scientist doing these experiments. He knows us. And we've got to realize God surrounds us like oxygen. So even when he's testing us, he's still there with us. And then we got to realize how God intricately woven each one of us together. And I think once we realize all those things, then we can move to how God tests us. And we discover how God's refining diamond testing is different than what we realize. And what I mean by that is I've never made a diamond. I'm not that smart. But I know to make it, it's a rock, right? And they get it to the right heat, and it compresses, and you can get it down enough, and then the diamond's there. But the people who are smart enough to do that, they know just the right temperature, just the right pressure to get that diamond. And I think when we realize God's woven us together, God knows the diamond each one of us have on the inside. So when he's testing us, he's refining us to get that diamond out. He knows exactly the right kind of pressure, the right kind of heat. And it might be a bit uncomfortable, but that's all right because he's with us. And he's helping get this diamond out. And I love how the psalmist ends this psalm. He says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my thoughts. See if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way of everlasting." Man. I think something that we need to realize with God's refining diamond testing is that it requires authenticity and humility. I read that end of the psalm, and I read this psalm as being so authentic, even so humble. You can read the verses above where he talks about God killing all the wicked. Like, you see him being authentically who he is. And there's a humility to offer God into that space to come and test. And I believe all this comes from realizing how God knows us better than we know ourselves. He surrounds us like oxygen, and he intricately woven us together. When we realize that, we can lean into God's refining diamond testing. We're able to kind of take that leap because we know God knows us better than we know ourselves. We know he's not going to push us over the edge of a cliff. He's not going to give us too much to handle. We can rest and know that he's with us because he surrounds us like oxygen. So he's not throwing a test at me and then turning his back saying, all right, Matt, here you go. See how you go with this one? Boop. All right, I'm going to go over here. Let me see. No, he doesn't do that. He's there with us. And then we also can rest in the knowing that he's woven us together so he knows the diamond on the inside. He knows what we're capable of, and that's what he's pushing for. Which brings me back to my Shark Tank. I hated doing the Shark Tank training. I can't tell you the times that I puked afterwards, after these training sessions. I can't tell you the times that I just laid there when the round would be done and Pete would be like, Matt, you can get up. And I would be like, no, I'm good. But what I can tell you is that pushing and that testing was like refining diamond testing because my coach knew what I was capable of. He knew what I could push through. And thankfully, for that kind of coaching, I never had a fight where I gassed out. I never had a fight where I felt like I was in over my head because I had this testing to back it up. And the testing wasn't fun. It's not fun when you have 15 minutes and you get to around 13 minutes. And that's usually when Pete would be really mean and he'd throw in someone who knew a little bit and someone who was bigger than me, which is pretty much most of the people in the gym. But, he'd probably try to find the biggest. And that person would be told to just make my life miserable. And oh my goodness, they did. It was bad. So the testing's not easy sometimes, but the fruit from it is amazing. The fruit from it in that photo that I showed when I won that fight, that was at a point where I was thinking of giving up my career. And Pete pushed me harder that fight camp than any other. And the fruit of winning that fight the way I did, getting my hand raised, having people notice some of the skills I developed, man, that was awesome. And I kind of think it's the same when God tests us. I think he does this refining diamond testing. He knows the diamond on the inside. So I guess I wanted to end it by asking you a question. And it's, will we, and I put we because I'm included, I am far from perfect. If I ever tell you otherwise, you have my permission to hit me or throw something at me. So there you go. But will we lean into God's radical love for God's refining diamond testing that is transformative? Are we going to lean into that radical love of God? And I say radical because it's not all rosy all the time. It's this shaky love. It's this love that can call us out when we do the wrong thing. But it's a love that's holding us. So are we going to lean into it? Are we going to be a part of this refining diamond testing? Because it's transformative if we're willing to lean in. And it's something I'm trying to lean into more. I'm trying to be authentic. I'm trying to be humble. Because those things are harder than we make it out. Especially, I think in the church world, it can get harder and harder for us to be authentic because we probably come on a Sunday and we put on our church face, right? If we've had the worst week, we won't let anyone know. We'll just, put the smile on and we'll sing songs about Jesus, which is great. But we'll hide some of that authenticity. It's something I'm trying to get better at. I'm trying to be more authentic. I'm trying to be more humble. I'm trying to accept God's teaching that He's given me when, it's in my quiet time or when it's in my wife calling me out saying, Matt, you're getting a bit too angry. You need to chill out. I need to be humble in those moments. So I'm trying to lean into it, and I hope that you'll try with me. Because I know this kind of testing can lead to some transformative stuff. And I think more than anything, I'd love to see us as followers of Christ transformed, becoming little, like, imitators of Jesus in our community. That's what I want. That's what my passion is, but we have to lean into this kind of testing. So I'm going to close in prayer, and then Trevor is going to come back up and lead us in our last song. God, I thank you so much for who you are. I thank you for your love and for your grace and for the way that you know us. The way that you know what I'm going to say before it's even a thought in my head or before it even comes out of my mouth, you know it. I thank you for how you made me and put me together. When I was formless and I wasn't even yet growing in my mom's belly, you were holding me. You were intricately weaving me together. I thank you for how you surround me like oxygen and there's nowhere I can go to escape you. And I pray that as I rest in all these things that I'll lean in and allow your refining diamond testing. That I'll come to you authentically and with humility. So I can be transformed into what you've created me to be. In your amazing name, amen.